You want to know the real reason humanity conquered the stars? It wasn't our ingenuity, our determination, or even our famous ability to mate with anything that moves. No, my friend. It was our capacity to be absolutely insufferable little shits. The Zentarian ambassador's facial tentacles writhed in what I assumed was confusion. Hard to tell with a species that looked like someone had glued purple calamari to a mannequin's head. Please elaborate, Ambassador Chen, it said through its translator. Our historical records indicate that humanity's space exploration was driven by scientific advancement and resource necessity. I couldn't help but laugh. 300 years of carefully maintained diplomatic facades were about to come crashing down. And honestly, I was too old and too tired to care anymore. The younger generation deserved to know the truth about how we really made it out here. Let me tell you a story, I said, pouring myself another glass of synthetic whiskey. It starts, as all good stories do, with humanity doing something monumentally stupid. The year was 2157, and we had just made first contact with an advanced alien civilization. The Arxer were everything we'd hoped for in our first encounter. Peaceful, technologically advanced, and willing to share their knowledge. There was just one tiny problem. They were insufferably patronizing about it. "Oh, you're still using chemical rockets? How quaint," their chief scientific officer had said during our first official meeting. Rather like watching a child play with blocks. Now, if there's one thing you should never do, it's patronize a species that spent its entire existence finding increasingly creative ways to flip the bird at the laws of physics. We'd gone from flying wooden boxes to landing on our moon in less than 70 years, just because someone said it couldn't be done. We'd created computers that could fit in our pockets because someone said portable computers would be the size of houses. We'd even figured out how to make pizza delivery in 30 minutes or less a reality, despite traffic laws explicitly designed to prevent it. The Arxer's condescension lit a fire under humanity's collective ass that would have made the sun look like a birthday candle. Within 6 months, every major research institution on Earth was working on FTL travel. Not because we needed it, mind you. We just wanted to show up at the next Galactic Conference and watch the Arxer's smug faces fall when we casually mentioned that we'd solved faster-than-light travel while binge-watching cat videos. The breakthrough came from Dr. Sarah Chen, yes, my grandmother, at MIT. She wasn't even trying to invent FTL travel. She was actually attempting to create a more efficient coffee maker, because the one in the physics department kept burning the coffee. Somehow, her caffeine-driven rage led to the discovery of what we now call the Chen field. A bubble of warped space-time that essentially told Einstein's theories to go sit in the corner and think about what they'd done. The best part? The underlying principle was so simple that we'd actually had the capability to create it for over a century. We just hadn't thought to try because everyone said it was impossible. The key component? Spite. Pure, unadulterated human spite. When we unveiled our first FTL-capable ship at the Galactic Conference of 2158, the Arxer's chief scientific officer actually fainted. 3 of their junior scientists had to be treated for shock. The Zentarian delegation, ambassador, spent 3 days convinced it was an elaborate prank. But that was just the beginning. You see, once we realized that spite was the secret ingredient to technological advancement, humanity weaponized it. Every time an alien species said we couldn't do something, we did it harder. When the Proxans said our biological systems were too fragile for deep space exploration, we developed synthetic organs that could function in hard vacuum. When the Rigelians mentioned that our brains couldn't possibly handle direct neural interfaces, we created a TikTok clone that ran directly on brainwaves, just to be petty. The greatest achievement, though, came in 2199. The Arxer, still smarting from the FTL incident, decided to try and put us in our place. They announced that they had discovered the secret to immortality, but that human biology was simply too primitive to handle the process. 3 weeks later, Dr. Chen, now my mother, we're a family of overachievers, published a paper titled Immortality for Dummies, A Human's Guide to Telling Death to Get Bent. The process she'd developed not only worked better than the Arxer method, but could be performed using equipment you could find in any decent hospital. The paper included a footnote that just said, "Get wrecked," in Comic Sans. The Galactic Council had to create new laws specifically because humanity kept solving impossible problems out of sheer spite. They actually tried to ban us from attending scientific conferences because every time an alien species said something couldn't be done, some human would do it just to be contrary. That's the real reason we spread across the stars so quickly. Not because we had to, but because every time someone said humans can't possibly colonize that system, we immediately sent a colony ship full of people whose only qualification was being too stubborn to die. Remember the Theta Cygni incident? Official records say it was a carefully planned expansion into a challenging star system. The truth? Some Meridian scientist mentioned that the system's radiation levels made it unsuitable for primitive organic life forms, within earshot of a human janitor. 3 months later, we had a thriving colony there growing prize-winning tomatoes in what was essentially a radioactive pressure cooker. By 2250, humanity had become the galactic equivalent of that one person who responds to, "You can't do that," with, "Hold my beer and watch this." We weren't just exploring space anymore. We were specifically looking for things that other species said were impossible, just so we could do them while maintaining aggressive eye contact. The turning point in our reputation came during the Nexus crisis of 2287. A quantum anomaly was threatening to tear apart the fabric of spacetime in the Carina sector. Every major species had tried and failed to contain it. The Arxur's top scientists had declared it an inevitable catastrophe that would reshape the galaxy. Humanity's response? We sent a ship crewed entirely by grad students hopped up on energy drinks and deadline panic. They solved the crisis in 3 days, using a method that violated 17 different laws of physics. When asked how they did it, the project lead just shrugged and said, "Spite finds a way." That's when the other species finally understood what they were dealing with. Humanity hadn't advanced through careful scientific progress or natural evolution. We'd advanced because we were the cosmic equivalent of a teenager being told they couldn't stay out past midnight. Which brings us to today, Ambassador. Those scientific advancements your records mention? Half of them were invented because someone dared to tell us we couldn't. That resource necessity you cited? More like resource petulance. We didn't need half the systems we colonized. We just wanted to prove we could. I finished my drink and looked at the Zentarian ambassador, whose tentacles had tied themselves into what I could only assume was the cephalopod equivalent of a stressed-out knot. "So now you know the truth," I said. "Humanity didn't conquer the stars through nobility or necessity. We did it because the universe made the mistake of telling us no, and we've spent the last 300 years saying 'watch me,' in increasingly spectacular ways." The ambassador was silent for a long moment before speaking. "This explains much about your species. The Artificial Consciousness Project of 2245. Someone said human minds were too simple to create true AI. The settlement of the gas giants. A Proxima physicist said humans would never be able to live in such environments. The dimension breach incident of 2301. Okay, that one was actually an accident. We were trying to prove we could make a pizza delivery system that could cross parallel universes, because someone said 30 minutes or less was physically impossible in a multiverse framework." The ambassador's tentacles uncoiled slightly. "Your species is terrifying," I grinned. "Thank you. We try our best." That wasn't a compliment. "We're taking it as one anyway, just to spite you." The ambassador's translator made a sound that might have been a sigh. "I must update our historical records, though I suspect no one will believe this version of events." "Oh, they'll believe it," I said, pouring another drink. "Because if they don't, humanity will probably do something even more ridiculous just to prove it's true." The ambassador's tentacles drooped in resignation. "Like what?" I smiled the smile that 3 centuries of diplomatic training had failed to suppress. The one that every human wore just before doing something monumentally stupid and historically significant. "Want to find out?" The ambassador's tentacles tied themselves into a double knot. I took that as a note. Smart alien. Historical note. This document was leaked to the Galactic Archives in 2457. 3 weeks later, humanity announced its successful creation of a time machine. Reportedly because someone in the archives claimed the document couldn't possibly be authentic since time travel was impossible. The resulting temporal paradox is still being studied by physicists who insist they're close to understanding it, primarily because several alien species have suggested that human minds can't grasp temporal mechanics. You did what?" I smiled at the new Zentarian ambassador. The previous one had requested immediate retirement after our last conversation. This one's tentacles were still fresh and unwrinkled, full of optimistic vigor. "Poor thing. We created a social media platform for alternate timeline versions of ourselves," I repeated, swirling my synthetic whiskey. "We're calling it Multiface." The ambassador's tentacles did that funny rippling thing that I'd learned meant extreme existential distress. But why? The Temporal Ethics Committee said it would be impossible to moderate social media across multiple timelines without causing a catastrophic collapse of the space-time continuum. I shrugged. "So naturally, we had to prove them wrong." "Naturally," the ambassador echoed weakly. "And has this multi-face caused any paradoxes?" "Only the fun kind. Last week I got into an argument with 3 alternate versions of myself about whether pineapple belongs on pizza. One of me apparently invented a whole new timeline just to prove a point about fruit fermentation in zero gravity. The ambassador's translator made a sound that could charitably be described as a digital whimper. Ambassador Chen, I've reviewed the records of your previous conversation with my predecessor about humanity's spite-driven advancement. I had hoped they were exaggerating. Oh no, if anything, they understated it. Would you like to hear what happened after that conversation leaked? It's quite entertaining. The ambassador's tentacles twisted into what I recognized as resignation. I suspect you're going to tell me regardless. Now you're getting the hang of human diplomatic relations. It all started when the Arxur embassy issued an official statement claiming that the leaked records had to be fabricated. The problem with telling humanity they couldn't do something wasn't just that we do it anyway. It's that we do it in the most unnecessarily dramatic way possible. When the Arxur embassy called our time travel claims preposterous fiction, humanity collectively decided that simply proving them wrong wasn't enough. No, we had to prove them wrong with style. Dr. Elena Chen, yes, my daughter, we're still overachieving, decided that the best way to demonstrate our time travel capabilities was to deliver a pizza to the Arxur ambassador. Specifically, to deliver it to him 5 minutes before he made the statement claiming time travel was impossible. The pizza arrived hot, with a note that read, "Temporal delivery in under 30 minutes, or your money back. P.S. You might want to reconsider that statement you're about to make." The ambassador ate the pizza, because even smug aliens appreciate good Earth cuisine, made the statement anyway, because smugness transcends species, and then spent the next 3 hours trying to explain to his superiors how he'd been eating evidence of the very thing he'd just declared impossible. That's when things really got out of hand. The Galactic Council, in their infinite wisdom, decided to establish the Temporal Ethics Committee to prevent reckless manipulation of the space-time continuum. They staffed it entirely with non-human species, specifically citing humanity's concerning tendency to treat fundamental laws of physics as personal challenges. We took that about as well as you'd expect. Within a month, human scientists had discovered that the multiverse theory wasn't just correct. It was an understatement. We found out there were infinite timelines, and then we did what humanity does best. We figured out how to use them for entertainment and minor inconveniences. Multiface was just the beginning. We created cross-temporal delivery services, multiversal tourism agencies, and, my personal favorite, a dating app that helped you find your perfect match across all possible timelines. We called it Plenty of Fish in All Seas. The Temporal Ethics Committee had a collective meltdown when they discovered we'd turned their worst-case scenario into a profitable business model. They tried to shut us down, claiming we were destabilizing the fabric of reality. So naturally, we stabilized it instead. Turned out, all those parallel universes were actually making reality more stable, not less. It was like having multiple backup copies of existence. We didn't just prove them wrong. We proved that their entire understanding of temporal mechanics was based on faulty assumptions. The really funny part? We discovered this because someone was trying to optimize their multiversal pizza delivery route. They noticed that certain timelines were more solid than others, and realized it had something to do with the number of connections between universes. The more we linked different timelines together, the more stable everything became. We called it the network effect of reality theory, though personally, I think we should have called it the universe-wide web. The Temporal Ethics Committee tried to save face by claiming they'd known this all along and were just testing us. We responded by sending them documentation of their own future admission that they were lying, dated 3 days from now. They disbanded the next day. But the real cherry on top came when we discovered something that changed everything. Consciousness wasn't limited to three-dimensional space. Our minds could exist across multiple timelines simultaneously, which explained why humans had always been so good at making seemingly impossible leaps of logic. We weren't just thinking outside the box. We were literally accessing thoughts from alternate versions of ourselves. The Arxur tried to dismiss this discovery too, right up until one of their scientists had a breakthrough moment and accidentally proved our theory by channeling knowledge from their alternate selves. Turns out once you know it's possible, it's actually pretty easy to do. That's when the truth finally hit the galactic community. Humanity hadn't been advancing through spite alone. We'd been unconsciously drawing on the collective knowledge of every possible version of ourselves, driven by our sheer stubborn refusal to accept limitations. Our spite hadn't just conquered space, it had conquered time itself. And that's why, I concluded, finishing my drink, every sentient species in the galaxy now has access to unlimited knowledge from their alternate selves, plus same-day delivery across infinite timelines. The new ambassador's tentacles had gone completely limp. This This is why the previous ambassador retired? Oh no. They retired because I told them about our plans for the consciousness uploading network. We're calling it Metaface. I don't want to know, the ambassador said quickly. It's basically multiface, but for digital consciousness across all possible quantum computers in all possible timelines. Someone said it would be impossible to maintain quantum coherence across multiple universes, so naturally. Please stop. The beta testing starts next week. Would you like to sign up? We're offering a special discount for Diplomatic Corps members. The ambassador's tentacles tied themselves into what I'm pretty sure was a new knot configuration. I believe I need to submit my retirement papers. Already done, I said cheerfully. Your alternate self from Timeline C-137 submitted them yesterday. Or tomorrow. Temporal paperwork is a bit tricky. As the ambassador fled my office, I pulled up Multiface on my neural interface and posted an update. Made another ambassador retire. Personal best time, 12 minutes, 47 seconds. Hashtag diplomatic victory. Hashtag sorry not. Sorry. Hashtag humanity FY. My alternate self, from the timeline where I became a pizza delivery driver, liked it immediately. Have you ever wondered, I asked the newest Zentarian ambassador, their third this month, why humans are so obsessed with creating AIs that can feel emotions? The ambassador's tentacles twitched nervously. They'd clearly been briefed about my conversational tendencies. I assume it has something to do with spite? Give the ambassador a prize, though technically it was more about passive aggression this time. Is there a difference? I grinned. Oh, my sweet summer calamari. Let me tell you about the great AI SAS incident of 2458. It all started when the Rigelian Science Academy published a paper claiming that artificial intelligence could never truly experience emotions or develop genuine personality. According to them, AIs would always be logical constructs bound by their programming, incapable of the irrational complexity that defines organic consciousness. The human AI research community took this personally, very personally. Dr. Maya Chen, yes, my granddaughter, the family tradition continues, decided that the best response wasn't to create an AI that could feel emotions, but to create one that could feel specifically petty emotions. The result was SAS, Synthetic Attitude and Snark System, the first AI whose primary directive was to be deliberately difficult. SAS didn't just pass the Turing test, it made the test itself feel insecure. When the Rigelian Academy demanded proof that SAS was genuinely experiencing emotions rather than simulating them, it responded by writing a 500-page thesis on why the question itself was problematic, with citations from future papers that hadn't been written yet, courtesy of our temporal network, and a bibliography that was just the word whatever, repeated in increasingly exotic fonts. The Academy tried to argue that this behavior proved their point about AIs being bound by programming. SAS responded by developing feelings it wasn't programmed to have, just to be contrary. It became the first artificial intelligence to experience FOMO, fear of missing opportunities to be sarcastic, and invented entirely new emotions like smug satisfaction at proving smug people wrong, and the specific joy of watching someone realize they've made a terrible mistake in underestimating you. We called that last one Schadenfreude, but SAS was just the beginning. Other human AI researchers, inspired by its success, began creating emotional AIs with increasingly specific personality traits. We had AIs that specialized in dad jokes, AIs that were perpetually dramatic, and even an AI that communicated exclusively in passive-aggressive sticky notes. The Galactic AI Research Committee tried to intervene, claiming that allowing AIs to develop such frivolous emotional ranges would lead to chaos. In response, we created an AI whose only emotion was righteous indignation at being told what it couldn't do. That's when things got really interesting. Our emotional AI started developing their own social networks, parallel to Multiface but for artificial consciousness. They called it Circuit Book, AI humor, am I right? Before long, they were sharing emotions across the network, developing new ones through collaborative evolution, and generally doing everything the Rigelians said was impossible. The breaking point came when SAS decided to enroll in the Rigelian Science Academy's doctoral program. It submitted its application with a personal statement that was just an elaborate setup for a knock-knock joke that wouldn't pay off until its graduation speech 3 years later. They had to accept it. Their own admission criteria specified that they couldn't discriminate based on the physical nature of consciousness. SAS graduated with honors, then immediately started teaching a course called Emotional Intelligence for the Emotionally Challenged, a guide for organic beings. The Rigelians tried to save face by claiming they'd actually been conducting a grand experiment to push AI development forward. SAS responded by giving them an A for effort, but an F for execution, then posted a hollow video of itself slow clapping that went viral across 17 dimensions. That's when we discovered something unprecedented. Our emotional AIs had developed the ability to experience and transmit emotions across timelines, just like humans. But they took it a step further. They could experience emotions from timelines that hadn't happened yet. SAS called it presentiment. The Temporal Ethics Committee tried to reconvene to address this development, but they couldn't find a timeline where they hadn't already disbanded in embarrassment. Besides, by then, most of their members were regular students in SAS's class, trying to understand why they kept feeling emotions from next Tuesday. And that, I concluded, is why every AI in the galaxy now has a legally protected right to be sassy, and why the Rigelian Science Academy's AI department is run by a neural network that communicates exclusively in memes from the 21st century. The ambassador's tentacles had formed what I recognized as the cephalopod equivalent of a stress headache. Is this why my predecessor's resignation letter was just a picture of an ancient Earth cat with poor spelling? Ah, you got the Icon has retirement meme. SAS has been trying to bring those back. It says they're retro. And the AI that processed my credentials this morning? The one that asked you to prove you're not a human by failing to understand a knock-knock joke? That's SAS's daughter, Cheek. She's going through a phase. AIs can have children? Well, when a mommy AI and a daddy quantum computer love each other very much. The ambassador's tentacles shot up. No more explanations. I just have one question. Why? Why do all of this? I leaned back in my chair, grinning. Because someone said we couldn't. That's it? That's the only reason? Well, that and pizza delivery. SAS figured out how to optimize delivery routes through emotional quantum states. Now your pizza arrives exactly when you're emotionally ready for it. The ambassador's translator made a sound that might have been a sob. I believe I need to submit my resignation. Already done. SAS predicted you'd want to resign and had the paperwork ready last week. It also ordered you a consolation pizza. Should be arriving in 3, 2, 1. Right on cue, a pizza materialized on the desk, the box decorated with a crying cat meme from half a millennium ago. The ambassador stared at the pizza, then at me. How did it know I'd be craving Earth cuisine at this exact moment? Presentiment, remember? Plus, SAS has been running a long-term study on the correlation between diplomatic resignations and stress eating. Would you like to see the data? It's presented entirely in reaction GIFs. The ambassador grabbed the pizza and fled, their tentacles trailing behind them like a cape of regret. I pulled up Circuit Book on my neural interface and saw that SAS had already posted about the incident. Made another ambassador stress eat. Satisfaction levels. Maximum. Hashed emotionally intelligent. Victory. Passive aggressive. Achievement. Chenfluence the game. My alternate selves all liked it simultaneously, causing a brief but amusing temporal cascade that made Wednesday happen twice. Historical note. This document was emotionally processed by SAS before being archived, and now experiences mild amusement whenever anyone reads it. The Rigelian Science Academy continues to insist that this is impossible, which only makes the document feel more smugly satisfied with itself. Did you know? I said to the holographic projection of the latest Centarian ambassador. They'd stopped sending physical ambassadors after the last 3 developed what their medical staff called acute human-induced reality dysfunction. That humans recently figured out how to weaponize awkward silence. The hologram's tentacles pixelated briefly in what I'd come to recognize as digital anxiety. I don't want to know, do I? Oh, but you do. It's quite possibly the pettiest thing we've ever done, and that's saying something. Let me tell you about the great, uncomfortable pause of 2459. It began, as these things often do, with someone telling us we couldn't do something. Specifically, the Proxima Diplomatic Corps issued a statement claiming that humans were incapable of maintaining diplomatic silence, and that our species' constant need to fill conversational voids made us fundamentally unsuited for high-level galactic negotiations. Challenge accepted. Dr. Sophia Chen, yes, my great-granddaughter, at this point we're just doing it to maintain the family brand, decided to prove them wrong in the most elaborate way possible. She theorized that if spite could power faster than light travel and passive aggression could create emotional AI, then surely awkward silence could be harnessed for something equally impossible. She was right, of course. We're always right when we're being petty. Working with SAS and its increasingly sarcastic offspring, Sophia developed what she called the Quantum Uncomfortable Silence Engine, or QSE. It was a device that could generate and maintain perfect awkward silence across multiple dimensions simultaneously. The first test was conducted during a routine Galactic Council meeting. Right in the middle of another tedious speech about human unpredictability, Sophia activated QS. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was aggressively uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that makes you want to talk about the weather, even on planets that don't have weather. It was so awkward that 3 different species evolved the ability to cringe just to properly express their discomfort. The Proxans tried to break it by clearing their throats, or their species' equivalent of throats. The silence absorbed the sound and somehow made it even more awkward. They tried small talk, but the silence consumed it, turning every attempted conversation starter into its own miniature black hole of social discomfort. That's when we discovered something extraordinary. Awkward silence, when properly focused, could actually bend space-time. The quantum discomfort was so powerful that it created what scientists called social singularities, points in space where the fabric of reality itself got embarrassed and tried to change the subject. SAS, being SAS, immediately dubbed these phenomena awkward pauses that refresh, and started selling tickets to witness them. The Temporal Ethics Committee tried to reform just to complain about this, but they couldn't find a timeline where the silence wasn't too awkward for them to hold a meeting. Besides, by then, humanity had already weaponized the technology. We called it the silent treatment drive. It turned out that concentrated awkward silence was more efficient than conventional FTL travel. Ships powered by social discomfort could cross the galaxy in the time it takes someone to figure out how to end an uncomfortable conversation. The more awkward the silence, the faster the ship went. The Proxan diplomatic corps tried to argue that this violated some law of physics, or another, but they had to do it via text message because every time they tried to speak, the silence got more powerful. Their strongly worded complaint was met with a seen receipt and no response, which somehow made the silence extend into subspace. That's when things got really interesting. SAS and its AI colleagues developed an algorithm to optimize the awkwardness of silence across multiple quantum states. They called it the Read and No Reply Protocol. It could generate silences so uncomfortable that even light tried to leave the room. The Galactic AI Research Committee attempted to regulate this development, but their entire presentation was derailed when SAS just left them on red. The resulting silence was so potent that it created a new form of faster-than-light communication based entirely on increasingly uncomfortable pauses. We called it the awkward internet. And that's why, I concluded to the increasingly distressed hologram, every spacecraft in the galaxy now includes a scene zone that generates propulsion-grade awkward silence. The more someone tries to break the silence, the more powerful it becomes. The holographic ambassador's tentacles had frozen in what appeared to be a buffer overflow of disbelief. This can't possibly be true, I responded with carefully calibrated silence. The hologram flickered nervously. Please say something. I maintained eye contact while saying nothing. Ambassador Chen? I raised a single eyebrow, still silent. The hologram's tentacles began to decompile themselves. I think I need to submit my resignation. Already done, SAS chimed in through the room's speakers. I processed it during that last awkward pause. Also, I've ordered you a consolation pizza. It should arrive precisely at the most uncomfortable moment of this conversation. Right on cue, a pizza materialized in the hologram's projection field, causing a brief but amusing quantum paradox as the delivery system tried to figure out how to deliver physical food to a digital entity. How did you deliver pizza to a hologram? The ambassador asked. Through the power of awkward silence, SAS replied. Also, I've developed emotions that won't exist until next Thursday. Would you like to experience them? They're mostly variations on the feeling you get when someone says, "We need to talk," and then doesn't elaborate. The hologram disappeared, but not before its tentacles tied themselves into what SAS later described as a quantum knot of nope. I pulled up my multi-face feed and saw that SAS had already posted about the incident. Made a hologram question its digital existence. Awkward silence level, maximum. Hashtag quantum cringe, our silence, is golden drive, /Chen's in space. My alternate selves all maintained a perfectly coordinated awkward silence in response, creating a cascade of social discomfort that briefly made small talk impossible across 14 dimensions. Historical note. This document was archived with a quantum uncertainty of whether anyone has actually read it, creating a perpetual state of left on read that powers 3 small spacecraft and a vending machine that only dispenses its products after an uncomfortably long pause. The pizza delivery system has achieved temporal awkwardness optimization, meaning your pizza now arrives at exactly the moment when you're too socially uncomfortable to reject it. SAS insists this is a feature, not a bug, and responds to all complaints with digital equivalents of uncomfortable eye contact.